Hey guys, welcome back to the fourth video in the multi-tenant RLS auth video series. In the last video, we saw how to set up RLS on the database side of things. And now in this video, we're going to take a look at how to leverage all of the security features we've implemented in the last two videos inside of our application. And specifically, I'll be showing you how to set the user session on the database as the currently logged in user so that we can query as the currently logged in user. Then we'll take a look at how to manage the user session on the client. And lastly, we'll build a small to-do app for the currently logged in user. And of course, in the next video, we'll wrap things up and do an overview of the entire series. All right, that's our agenda for today's video. My name is Confident and I'm a developer advocate at AppSmith. Without any delay, let's get started. Alright, so this is the current state of our application, and in the last video we actually created a dummy page to create RLS for the database. So we don't need this anymore, and I'm just going to delete this. And one thing I'll do is head back to the login page and re-log in to make sure my session is still valid. So I'm going to log in as Confident, and my password. All right, so now I should be logged in, and as you can see right here, we have my token which is going to be valid for 1 hour. So the first thing we're going to do is take a look at how to set the database session for the currently logged in user. And really, we actually saw this in the last video, but we're going to take a look at how to do this programmatically within the app. So to do it, what we need to do is first make sure we're connected as the AppSmith user. You saw that in the previous video. If you didn't catch the previous video, go check it out right here. We have our app connected as the AppSmith user, and we know for sure that we have row level security applied for our user. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a query using the mypg data source, and this is going to be a query to set the user session. So I can do I'm going to call this query set user. All right, and we do not really need any of these templates, and it's going to be a simple query that is going to set app.app_user to whoever is logged in. So for example, I can say confident at appsmith.com, and if I run this, Confidence is going to be the user who owns this database connection session. So if I comment this out and we do a quick check to figure out who is currently logged in by running this command to figure out who is logged in, you notice that it is Confident at AppSmith. So this is all well and good. Now, what we need to do is we make sure that this works programmatically. So I'm going to delete the second query and make sure that the actual user's email is passed into this query at runtime. So I'm going to use JavaScript. So this is going to come from this .params, the email. And with that, we should be good to go. You see that this evaluates to undefined right now, but at runtime, when this query is executed, we're going to have the email passed into it. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that the AppSmith server actually maintains one connection to the database. So it means whichever user's session is written through the app, all users who make use of that app will be able to read that user session and be able to perform operations as that user. So for example, if you have two users using your app, say one for example in Ghana and the other in USA, and the user in Ghana first logs in and has his session set, because the AppSmith server actually maintains one connection to the database, the user who is logging in from Canada will be able to read data owned by the user who logged in from Ghana. So we need to be able to fix this, and really it's really easy to fix. What we need to do to fix this problem on AppSmith specifically is that since it maintains just one connection to the database, we would need to set the user session every time before we actually run a real query. So this is going to be like a pre-execution where we always set user's session before we go to execute the actual query that reads data or writes data, for example. So I'm going to be showing you this under the next section where we talk about how to manage the user's session and query as the logged in user. All right, so now let's actually walk through programmatically setting up the user's session and running it as a pre-execution before the actual query. For that, we need some JavaScript help. So of course, we're going to go ahead to create a JavaScript file, and I'm going to call this app.js. And what we need here is a function to run our queries for us. So this is going to be a custom runner function. I'm just going to call this function run. It's going to be an async function. And the first thing we want to do is try to figure out if the logged in user's JWT token is valid. Remember that we set an expiry for 1 hour. So let's figure out if the user's JWT session token is still valid. So we're going to use a try catch block here, and first thing we want to do is we want to try to decode the user's JWT. So this is going to be const email. We're going to just grab out the email if it's valid, and here we're going to use JSON web token, which is the JWT library .verify. And we want to verify the user's token, which is saved in the AppSmith store right now. So this is going to be appsmith.store.token, and then we want to pass in our secret key or salt. In this case, it's just secret, so I'm going to type it in, and we should be good to go. So I'm going to return this email. So let's say return email, and we can give this function a test. So right now you can see that this is a valid token, and we're actually able to grab out my email address, which is exactly what we want. But in certain cases, the user's session or JWT token might be expired, and in that case, we want to tell the user that his session is expired so that they can go to the login screen and re-log in. So that's really easy to do. We can come here in the catch block and then let the user know to go do all of that. So we can say return show alert. We want to let the user know that his session is expired. Please re-log in, and we're going to set the alert type to warning. All right, and then we want to help the user by navigating them to the login page. So let's do in navigate. One small thing I'm going to do here is that while the app is in the editor mode, that is while we are building the app, we actually do not want to automatically perform the navigation. We only want the navigation to be automatically performed when the app is in the deployed mode. That is when we go hit the deploy button. That is the view our end users will have access to. So we can do a small check here and say if appsmith.mode is equal to edit. If the mode is edit, we really don't want to do anything, but if the mode is not edit, we want to automatically navigate our end users to the login page. That's exactly what we want to do. And this block will only run if there's an error decoding the user's JWT token. Now for the actual runner function, it is going to be designed to automatically run a query, and before that set the user's session before running the query. So we need to pass in the query function we want executed. So this is going to be a query, and then sometimes we might need to pass in parameters to this query. So we're going to set the second argument of this function to parameters. So I'm going to say params. All right, then what we're going to do here is, instead of returning the email, we actually want to run the set user query, and then when that's successful, we're going to go ahead to run the query passed into this function. So set the user query will set the session on the database, then we can go execute our actual target query. So let's run the set user query, and here we'll need to pass in the email address of the user, which is gotten from the JWT token. So this is email. All right, that looks good. Then we are going to execute the actual query. So this is going to be query.run, and here is where we pass in the parameters. So I'm going to pass in the params, and sometimes we might also need the user's email from the JWT token, so I'm just also going to add it here. All right, so that looks good, and we have our custom runner function goods to go. So we can test this out by building a simple flow that fetches the users to do as soon as they log into the application. So for that, I'm going to create another function. But just before that, let's create the query that will be used by this function. So let's go on to create a new query. I'm going to be creating a query for the to-dos table, and this is going to be a simple select query. So it's going to be a simple select query. I do not need any limits, and I'm going to call this query get to-dos. All right, that looks good. So I'm going to head back to the app.js file and write an init function that will automatically run the get to-dos query using our custom runner function. So this is going to be init. It's going to be an async function, and what I'm going to do is return await the execution of our get to this query. So don't forget, we're going to be using our custom runner function. So this is going to be this.run, and then I'll pass in the query I actually want to execute, which in this case is just get to dos. So I'm going to go ahead to run this, and as you can see, we have records coming back that are owned by the currently logged in user, which in this case is Confidence. You can see all records are owned by Confidence, and this is exactly what we want. So I'm just going to head over to the settings and make sure that the init function automatically runs at page load, and then I'll head back to the canvas. Let's delete this text widget, and I'm going to grab a table widget. Place that right here in the canvas. All right, this looks good. And I'm going to create a binding so that this displays all of the to-dos. So this is going to be get to-dos.data. And as you can see, we have a bunch of to-dos. I'm going to reorder things just a little bit. And yeah, I think this looks good. And right here, we can see the to-dos, ID, the user, the title, the status, and also the description of the to-do. And this is exactly what we want. All right, so let's finish things up by building a simple CRUD app for the currently logged in user. That's the to-do app we have right here on the screen. And the first functionality I'm going to be added after being able to read data, of course, is to be able to create data. So there are so many ways to do that. On AppSmith, you can actually grab a form widget. You have the JSON form widget and you have the form widget. You can actually use either of those two options. But today I'm going to be using the third option, which is creating records from within a table. So to do that, I'm going to head over to the table widget. I'm going to enable the allow adding a row button. So you can create a row, and you can see we have a button to add a new row. Now, if you take a look at this, these rows are not editable. That's because we do not have the editable box checked. Now we have it checked, but we do not want the ID to be editable, and also we do not want the user to be editable. That is going to be handled by the application. So the end user is going to be able to enter a title, enter a status, enter a description, and they will be good to go. But for the status, we actually want this to be a drop down. So I'm going to set the column type to a select drop down, and for the options, I'm going to paste in an array of label value, and you can see right now that the user can actually go into select a to do and they're good to go. So that's all the changes we need to set up for the UI. The next thing we need to do is actually write a query that will create this record in the database. So for that, I'm going to head over to my Postgres data source. We can actually use this shortcut to add an insert query, and as you can see, this has everything automatically pre-filled. I'm going to call this query create to do. All right, and instead of typing everything out, I'm just going to paste in the changes I want to make to this query. So one thing you notice is, first I'm going to turn off prepared statement so that you can see everything we have right here. But the changes I've made here is that the ID is going to be automatically generated using math.random. Then the user's email is going to be grabbed from the user's session that will be passed to this query at runtime. And then the other parameters, or the other values, which is the status, the description, and also the title, all of those will be passed as params to this query. So let's head over to the app.js file, and let's create a function that will actually create a to-do. So I'm going to call this create to-do, and this is going to be an async function. All right, and what I want to do is execute the create to-dos function. So this is going to be return await this dot run. I'm also going to be making use of our custom runner function, and then I want to run the create to-do query, and for the parameters, which is the data that would actually be used to create the to-do, this is going to come from table 1, which is the table widget dot new row property. All right, so that's going to be the payload. After that's done, the next thing we want to do is rerun the get to those queries so that we have the state of the application up to date. So I'm going to do a dot then, and here we want to do a this dot run, and we want to run the get to those query. All right, so this is exactly what we want. I am going to head back to the table widget, and I'm going to make sure that whenever the add a row button is clicked, which is the save row button, we want to go execute the create to do function, and that's all we need to do. So we can test this out. I'm going to enter a title saying watch movie, for example. It's going to have the status of to do, and the description is I really don't have any description, so let's say lorem ipsum. So I'm going to save this, and it's going to create this record in the database. And we take a look at it, you can see that we have that record created. The ID was automatically generated, like you saw. My user email was filled in from the session, my logged in user session, and then we have the title, status, and description added as well. Now, the last thing we'll do for this app is that we'll add a delete workflow, and that's going to be really, really easy to do. What I'm going to do is go back here, and let's use the lightning add button to add a delete query. And I'm just going to do a quick update so that we're filtering based on ID, which is the to-do ID, and that ID specifically will be passed into this query at runtime. I'm going to turn off prepared statement because we're using a where clause here, and right now it's undefined, which is actually fine. So let's head back to JS, and I'm going to create a function for the delete flow. So let's call this delete to do. It's going to be an async function, and here what we want to do is we just want to run the delete query and then update the state of the app by running the get to this query. So this is going to be return await this dot run delete. Oh, I did not name that query, so let's go back to name this query delete to do. All right, and we can head back to app.js. All right, head back to app.js and use the delete to do query. All right, then when that's done, we want to go run the get to do's query. All right, so we have the JS and logic part of it done. Now let's actually hook that up to the UI. So I'm going to head back to the table, and really we do not want the table to be editable. That's something you can set up on your own. So I'm going to hide the save stroke discard button. Then what I'm going to do is add a delete column, and we can go in to configure this column to have a type of icon button, and for the icon this is going to be the trash icon. I'm going to head over to the style, set the button variant to secondary, and give this a red color so that everyone knows we're serious. All right, so heading back to the content, whenever this button is clicked on, what we want to do is execute the delete to do function, and that's actually just going to delete the to do that was selected. But I think I skipped one thing. What we forgot to do right here is pass in the to do we actually want deleted. So that is going to be the ID used in the delete to do query, because we need to pass in the ID as a parameter to the query. So let's head back here, and what I'm going to do is pass that in as a parameter. So this is going to be table1 dot triggered row. From the trigger row object, we're going to be able to grab the ID and use it in the delete query. All right, so that looks good. and I will need to update this just a little bit. That looks fine. So I'm just going to delete the last to-do we created. I'm going to hit the delete icon. And as you can see, that to-do was deleted. So everything in our app is working really, really great, and we're almost done. Alright, our application is shaping up nicely. Now in this video, we've been able to see how to leverage the security features, which is the row level policies we created on the database, and also the auth workflow we built in the second video to create this really powerful app that knows how to log in a user and perform operations using that logged in user just using the database alone. So this is shaping up nicely and I'm really happy for it. Now in the next video, we'll take a look at how to clean things up, and then we'll take this application for a spin. So go check out the next video right here, which will be the last video in the series. Or if you missed the previous video, which is where we set up RLS on the database, go check this video out. All right, I'll catch you in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.